Now that was one way of importing this model. There is another way. Let's go ahead. In fact, I'm going to use, there's something called the light box in ZBrush. It's this button right up here. Just go ahead and click that. And light box will give you a bunch of models to work with for free. Ones you can practice on. Generally, like I'll have a lot of students work on the dog, or sometimes on this human male one, sometimes on the polysphere, something as simple as that. Right? If you hit your comma key, that'll also toggle between it. So comma key on, comma key off. Right? Go back to my red cap. Right? So there's this. If you hit Shift F on this particular model, you can see this is how they actually split the polygons up on this particular model to keep it all quads. So it keeps it nice and simple for you. But again, one of the other ways you can look to import into ZBrush is with the Go Z button. Now Go Z, you'll find it right here. Go Z is a really great little interoperability suite between 3D programs, where if I'm using 3D Studio Max or Maya or a number of other ones, I can directly from within those programs import directly into ZBrush. Let me show you how. So here's the drum from Maya. Okay. Now this is actually a little bit different than the one I originally imported in, because I added in a few more edge loops, as you can see, a few more divisions. But with this selected, I can click, there's a Go Z tab up here. I click Go Z, and there you go. It's now imported directly into ZBrush. I can hit P, so I'm in perspective. Shift F, and I can see, oh, see, I've already got the extra subdivisions right off the bat. So I know that that is the latest drum I've used. All right. To install ZBrush to where you need it to go, you need to click Preferences and this Go Z button right here. This Go Z will look at creating paths to Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max, Maya, Modo, Photoshop, and Sculptress. So you can actually then export models, this model directly back into Maya, Maya back into ZBrush, etc., etc., etc. It just goes on and on. It's really fantastic, and one to definitely something to use, and I've used it before many times when I'm working in Maya. All right. Now, some of the things that you might want to consider doing, I'm going to hit Shift P, so I'm back in my ortho view. See, it's nice and flat. While we're looking at our wireframe on this, we can now, as you can see, as I drag my mouse over to the right-hand side, I now have a little arrow key. That implies that I have a scrollability on this right-hand side. Remember, I told you this was a scrolling palette. So I can now scroll up and down and go to wherever I want to be able to go with this. All right. So this is the subtool palette. I'm going to go ahead and if you just click on the title, that closes that particular palette. It doesn't erase anything, it just closes it. I can now click my geometry tab, see all the different things I want to be able to do within geometry. We will cover some of this in this particular tutorial through these 4 volumes. We just may not get to all of it right now. There's a lot to explore in ZBrush. There's only so much time and so much I can show at any single time, but I will try to cover as much as I can with this. So we have the geometry tab. We have an array mesh. We won't get into that right now. Nanomesh, layers. Layers sounds just like what it is in Photoshop. If you have any practice in Photoshop, you create a layer, you add in details, you add another layer, add in more details. The same thing can be done with layers in ZBrush. Fiber mesh. It's a great tool to be able to create hair on your characters. If, let's say, you're doing an orc head or a man or a woman, you can create their hair in fiber mesh. Do keep in mind, and one of the biggest faults, some of the students think that when they create something in the fiber mesh, they then have perfect hair. Well, fiber mesh is really great for getting an approximation of what your model will look like with hair, whiskers or a mustache, beard, whatever. And it's really great for rendering within ZBrush because you can render in ZBrush. It does a great job, a great module for that. But it's not the greatest if you then look to export those fiber mesh, the geometry of it into another program. It can be very polygon intensive. So that's the one caveat I always have about fiber mesh. Great for in ZBrush. I wouldn't use it to export out of ZBrush unless you're doing, say in Maya or in Max, you're just rendering a cinematic scene and you're not using it for, say, a game model. All right. A couple of the things, you have a Geometry HD, which is high-end sculpting. We're not going to get into that. We have Preview, that's just showing what our particular model looks like. Surface, we will actually get into this a little bit later, but we're going to look to add in some noise on one of our models that we'll be looking to create. Deformation, I'll tell you what, this is a palette that I suggest highly you make one of your best friends. The functionality within deformation is just phenomenal. The things you can do with it, mirroring it, offsetting it, rotating it, bending it, blending it, doing all sorts of stuff. This is a very underutilized palette I have found. Most students don't even bother with this palette. And I'll tell you what, I use it extensively when I'm working on models, and I can only suggest you do the same. But we'll get into a lot of the functionalities within deformation as well. Masking. You can't model unless you're going to mask. Masking is what you might know masking to be in Photoshop. It's something similar, but with masking in ZBrush, it's phenomenal. It's a great way to assist you in your sculpting. It's a great way to help you out when you're masking by cavity masks, smoothness, peaks and valleys, all sorts of stuff. It's something that we'll get into during this entire tutorial. Visibility. This is where we can actually grow and shrink selections, etc. Polygroups, another one where you need to make it your best friend. Polygroups, let's go over that really quickly. For instance, this particular model, it's wire mesh. It's all one color. It's this red wax. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't technically see it as a red wax. It doesn't matter what this material is. If I change the material to, say, a skin shade, you'll notice it lightened it some, but there's still a certain particular color because this is just a base color that the polygroup created. Now, polygroup in ZBrush is, let's say this model has all one UV, like it's one contiguous mesh. There's no separations, no UV islands. Well, this will be seen as one particular polygroup. Now, the nice thing is with this is I can select certain elements and create a new polygroup that will allow me to sculpt on just that one section, etc. Let me show you. If I hold Control Shift and just draw a rectangle in the background, you see that green box? Let's say I want to get just this top row. So I'm going to grab that. Okay, let's do this again. We'll just grab this here too. There you go. So how did I do all that? Well, it's very simple. Control Shift is my selection marquee. As you can see, it changed to it's a select rectangle, but it allows me to select items out of the model and bring them back, bring them forward, etc. And it allows me to, I can do this with the model just to sculpt on it, or if I want to create polygroups, and I do quite a bit, this is one of those tools that I use a lot. So again, Control Shift, I'm going to click it, see how it's all nice and green. All right, I'm going to hit Control W. Well, you can see that just changed color. Now if I Control Shift and just click in the background, left click, Control Shift, left click, I'd have two different polygroups. Okay, that means if I Control Shift and click on one, it hides the other one automatically. So I can now sculpt everything I do on this, the coloring, sculpting, whatnot, will only be on this polygroup only. Or I can Control Shift and draw a rectangle in the background, and I can invert that. And again, everything I do to this will not affect the other piece. Also, for instance, if I have this selected and it's on my screen, I can also mask this. If I mask it, just Control, and I can grab it, So it's masked. You can see it's gotten dark. Control Shift left click in the background. You can see I've now got an area that's selected and masked. Now because it's so low polygon, you can see it's bleeding off into another polygon. You won't have that when we subdivide this up, okay? Clearing the mask is Control and this dragging a rectangle in the background. Now let's say I want to go ahead and I want to Control Shift and I want to grab all of this, all right? And I didn't go past a certain point, so it only grabbed, you have to see where this goes. I have to get past a certain point in the wireframe for it to be able to see these edge loops. Now, if this was more subdivided, I'd have this a whole lot easier. But because right now it's so low polygon, I have to get really close to the edge loops for it to mask over or select over the polygons I need. So again, Control Shift, and I'm going to grab this right up to that line. There we go. Control W again, creates a new polygroup. Control Shift dot in the background, and there you go. All right. So that's polygroups. That's going to be a best friend to you. Learn it, go through it. It's fantastic.